having 27 years in prison and coming out stronger than he went in, and his brain worked better, didn't it? You know, does that happen these days with normal people? Of course it doesn't. They go in and they come out as better criminals than they went in. They're not taught or trained in the right way, are they? In this corrupt world that we live in.
Well, I suppose being into music in the late 70s, I was going to teenage year in the early 80s. I first heard of Nelson Mandela from the song Free Nelson Mandela by the Special AKA, and I think that brought Nelson Mandela's plight probably to a lot of people who didn't know about him. I think that song was probably quite instrumental in letting people know who Nelson Mandela was and what he fought for. And then I believe he was freed in 1990, around about the same time as the Berlin Wall collapsed, and that time just seemed a very exciting time.
To be true, I don't really think about his effect to the people. I think he was fighting for their people, and I think he was a very brave man. That's what I'm thinking. I don't think he was a bad president. He was in the prison for 27 years, I think, and he lost quite a little bit of his life and missed his family and a lot of things. I just think he was a man who was really fighting for the African people. That's what I'm thinking about him. I think that's it. I don't really know much about, but in my mind I don't think he's really affected the people. He just was fighting for their people.
I was born in South Africa, so obviously Mandela played a huge part in my parents' upbringing. I moved out of South Africa when I was 3, so personally I wasn't in South Africa to experience much of what he did after he was released from prison, but he obviously had a huge effect on everyone that lives in South Africa and lived in South Africa, and I think he's going to have a huge legacy.
Sorry if this is too personal a question, but why did your parents leave South Africa?
It was because of my dad's work, so yeah.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, Mandela was released from prison.
Okay.
Well, I think he affected people very deeply, simply because he was a man of such humility and dignity and honesty, and I think that as a South African that will always stay with us, and his legacy will be for us to determine actually in terms of how we're going to react towards what he has given us as South Africans, and time will tell, and we hope that it will be positive.
Okay, sorry if this is too personal a question, but why did you leave South Africa?
I'm only here for the day, so I came from South Africa this morning and I'll be returning to South Africa shortly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I am actually living in South Africa.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I was outside the embassy when Nelson Mandela was released in 1990. I was 8 months pregnant with my daughter, who's now 23, and his subsequent life and prior to that has been very significant for me and for her. She has been to South Africa with an anti-apartheid convention, so she has continued to have that connection with what's been happening there. So, yeah,
Okay.
very significant.
How do you think Nelson Mandela affected people, and what do you think his legacy will be?
Well, a friend of mine, when I said it was sad he died, said, well, he hasn't died really, a person like that doesn't die. So it made me think a lot, and their effect becomes much larger than them as an individual human being, and it's very hard to calculate. Probably last year he'll stay, I think, famous for probably for 200-300 years, like people like Thomas Jefferson and John Stuart Mill, all these great political people from the else I think Mandela will be remembered. And I haven't heard a word spoken against him since he died. That's quite exceptional. So he's up there with the greats, I think.
So, how would you say Nelson Mandela has affected people?
I'd say that he's affected people for the good, without a doubt. He was a very unusual man. He lived a long life. He spent a lot of time in prison. And when he came out of prison, when he was released, he took the country from one rather extreme standpoint or viewpoint to a very modern outlook.
What do you think his legacy will be?
I think his legacy will be that South Africa and possibly the rest of Africa will be able to move forward as a country in a way that they've been held back in the past. He's taken apartheid off of the agenda worldwide, finally and fully.
And do you think his work will continue impacting people even after his death?
Yes, without a doubt. He's a world figure. His name is known by just about anyone in the world. You can't say Nelson Mandela without people knowing who that is. And I think his legacy of a peaceful way to change a country will carry on for very, very many years.
Did you grow up in South Africa?
I spent part of my childhood in South Africa. I was born in Cape Town, spent my formative years there, but I moved over to London when I was about 6 years old with my mother, and I returned back when I was about 13.
So, why did you leave South Africa, and what made your mother decide to return?
I left with my mother because she disagreed with the apartheid regime, and she didn't want to expose me to that growing up. So unfortunately, because she was born in the UK, we were able to do that. So she renounced her citizenship, brought me over to the UK, and we returned in 1990 when I was 13, after Mandela had been released from prison, because she felt it was the country was going back into the right direction.
What impact do you think Mandela's release had on you at the time?
I was quite young, so I didn't understand. I suppose I didn't understand the political, ramifications of it. But I remember feeling positive because I, up until that point, had been very embarrassed about being from South Africa, and I felt that Mandela's release, provided me with, with something to sort of feel a little bit more comfortable with being a South African.
How do you think his release impacted your family aside from giving them the motivation to return?
Well, I think it impacted on us in a big way because it showed that South Africa was a country that was salvageable, and it provided hope that we could rebuild a community, rebuild a democracy, and live in South Africa and continue to be South Africans.
What would you say the reaction was in South Africa to his release?
It was hugely positive, and I think it enabled the community as a whole, across the races, to feel a sense of hope that the fighting and bloodshed would end.
So you wouldn't say there was much of a difference in reaction between races?
I think that the black community certainly were extremely happy about it, and obviously I don't think the white community could understand that reaction because of, we weren't discriminated against under apartheid, so it's difficult to say, but I think definitely that all the communities across the races were very, very happy about it.
But what difference did his presidency make on the country?
It made a huge difference to the country, and Mandela provided the the sort of sense of the voice of reason and the kind of glue, if you like, between the different communities. And certainly in amongst the ANC, he was a very rational leader, and he cared very much about uniting South Africa, and how he went about doing that was really amazing, actually.
What do you think his legacy will be?
I think his legacy will be one of peace and democracy and reconciliation for the country.
Okay,